welcome to this episode of Quakerism. Today I'm going to be talking about an article that came up in the Guardian newspaper a couple of years ago about Quakerism, which doesn't happen very often. And I'm wanting to talk about it for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it was quite an important article for me personally when I was reading about Quakerism and trying to understand what Quakerism was, and so I'm quite thankful for it because it was quite important in that journey for me. However, now having understood a lot more about Quakerism, having read a lot further about Quakerism, I realised there's quite a lot of things that are wrong in this article, and quite a lot of maybe new stereotypes which are coming out of the world about what modern Quakers in Britain are like today. For a bit of background then, for non-British listeners, the Guardian newspaper is a very popular newspaper within the UK with a very large readership, and in terms of its political alignment, it is more left-wing. And so the author, Simon Jenkins, he states very clearly at the beginning of the article that he is not a Quaker. He says that he's not even religious in any way, and his experience of Quakerism seems to come from having gone to a few meetings for worship, which have tended to be either weddings or funerals. And he's actually really not trying to be polemic or in any way negative about Quakers, which I think is the one thing that I find very frustrating about this article. He seems to be greatly in favour in what he thinks Quakerism is. The problem is, I don't think Quakerism is what he thinks it is. His first-hand sources and his sources generally seem to be quite vague. His main primary source is referred to as one of them, Quakers, that being, and a Birmingham University academic who I'm guessing either refused to give their name or Jenkins didn't want to give it. I'm not sure which one it is, but I find that a bit strange. So this article does seem to be based mainly on his personal opinion, rather than having deeply researched it and talking about Quakerism and the results of his research. And I suppose a good indicator of this is that it does appear on the opinion column of the Guardian website. So let's get to it then. The title of the article is "The Quakers Are Right. We Don't Need God." Oh no, he's used the G word. And is essentially about Quakers rejecting God. This in itself is a massive topic and isn't really in itself really discussed. It's sort of treated in Jenkins's article as a fait accompli that Quakers have indeed, as of 2018, decided that there is no more God in Quakerism, which now speaking in 2022, I can say is thoroughly not the case. So something has obviously instantly been misunderstood here. Now, the idea about Quakers talking about removing God or talking about the use of the word God in within Quakerism is not in any way a new one, certainly not in 2018. It goes back way further than that. And as I said, clearly hasn't yet been resolved. So there's a massive discussion, and I wouldn't say a debate, but I think there's certainly people talking about this within Quaker circles. And had the article, I think, been maybe looking on the one hand at those who are very in favour of getting rid of the traditional Christian language, shall we say, from Quakerism, and those who really want to retain it, and he was in the middle and weighing up the arguments and things like that, that would be a really fascinating article. But as I said, it's sort of taken that this has happened. Quakers no longer talk about God. So Jenkins then goes on to set the scene with some figures that he gets from this Birmingham University academic, showing the high proportion of agnostics and atheists within Quakers. I don't deny these figures. They seem highly plausible. They said that 43% of Quakers who were in this survey said that they couldn't profess a belief in God. However, what I do find difficult is what he then goes on to say is he says that, and this is a quote, "They come to meeting for fellowship, not for higher guidance." Just because someone doesn't believe in God doesn't mean that they can't be looking for any higher guidance. I mean, I'm really surprised in this whole article. I can't believe this has happened. This entire article goes by about Quakers looking to reject God, and the phrase inward light or inner light doesn't come up once, which is strange because this is so often used by friends who are uncomfortable with traditional Christian language and use that as a way to express what they're listening for, who is giving them the leadings, and so on. And if you're coming to meetings simply for fellowship, it kind of makes the whole reason for a Quaker meeting for worship to be little more than social. Now, it's of utmost importance that we do meet together physically when we can, pandemic aside, but that is not the purpose. The purpose is that we put ourselves all together to the task of listening, expecting, and sharing ministry. I feel that Jenkins's argument falls short of true Quaker experience when and it's particularly when he's talking about the lack of religiosity in the UK. He quotes the sociologist Grace Davie, who said that people are looking. This is going to be a quote. She said that people are looking for believing and not belonging. They do not like a church's faux collegiality, the handshaking, happy clapping, and sense of entrapment. They do not really seek God, rather a mental and physical space to sort out their thoughts, somewhere to find anonymity, the option to come and go without explanation or greeting, to move from one stage of commitment to another. Without doubt, I do come to meeting as I am, with my thoughts and my burdens, my worries, my stresses, and I often, yes, am coming looking for guidance, even if Jenkins doesn't think I am. However, the goal of the meeting, again, is not about my self-improvement or discussing my issues in a safe space, though of course that can be done. A Quaker meeting is fundamentally about belief, that coming together precisely in a place where there is no judgment, you can attune yourself to deeper senses of reality, and perhaps even God, or the inner light, or the spirit, or whatever it is you want to call it. My final bone to pick with the article, there are some good things, I'll come to the good things, but my final bone that I have to pick with it comes, hardly surprisingly, at the end of the article, where he says, and this is a quote, "Quakerism has added the experience of standing up and expressing doubts, fears, and joys amid a company of friends, who respond only with their private silence." Whilst I think so much of that is great, the idea that the meeting is supporting one another, we have a term for that, we call that holding them in the light, through people's doubts and through people's fears. But to say that we respond to that only with our private silence, again, really undermines the experience, and I feel kind of makes Quakers sound quite heartless. I've never met a group of people who are more passionate to improve the world than Quakers. Quakers are people of action who don't, despite what might be said, just sit in private silence and leave the world to their hardships and their fellow attenders and Quakers to their own problems. Quakers care deeply. It's so much more than just a safe space to talk about your feelings without judgment. It's a place where things are put into action, where leadings that have been shared are contemplated deeply, and where a belief that in the silence a way forward can be found. So the part that I did like about the article, having reread it, obviously I quite liked when I first read the article, it was quite new to me, the idea, that there could be people who had Christian heritage but were rejecting the idea of God. I did find that quite intriguing, so it did make me want to find more out. It just seems that the more I found out, the more untrue maybe that statement is a bit more blurred than I originally thought it was. But anyway, the bit that I did like about the article, having reread it, was perhaps maybe not something that Jenkins intended. It goes back to the original quote that Quakers are apparently looking to do away with the word God, as some Quakers find it uncomfortable. And if he sees quite rightly the counter-argument to this by saying that, and this is another quote, "Comfort is in the afterlife, and marketing it has been the Church's unique selling proposition since Luther and papal indulgences. To Luther it was a con. What is not a con is humanity's quest for comfort in the here and now." Although I disagree, actually, with a lot of the sentiment of this passage, what I think Jenkins is sensing maybe is that Quakers do not hold to as firm an idea of eschatology or heaven and hell as other denominations. Right from the get-go, Quakers were convinced of the idea that Christ had come to teach his people himself, and as such, God, the inner light, spirit, or whatever you want to call him or her, is present in this very moment. That heaven and hell are not some far-flung places at some point in the future, but present right here, right now. However, this has nothing to do necessarily with comfort. The well-known early Quaker William Penn, for example, wrote an entire treatise explaining that he believed deeply that life was not to be enjoyed, but was meant to be a trial and was meant to be difficult. And now he talks about that by carrying your cross, which is, again, another example of traditional Christian language within early Quakerism. And I suppose that gets me thinking, on William Penn and early Quakers, and maybe even early liberal Quakers at the beginning of the 20th century. The whole problem, I think, that modern Quakers in Britain, for example, have with getting rid of the word for God is that so many of our terms, so many of our early Quakers were so integrally tied with the Christian tradition that to get rid of it would be very difficult. So, for example, just one off the top of my head, George Fox, one of the founders of Quakerism in the 1650s, coined the phrase "that of God in everyone," which has been used and misused a lot. But this is a very central idea to Quakerism. And what do you do with it? If you change it, then does it lose some of its meaning? It's impossible to exclude these thoughts and these people from Quakerism, and that because their contributions are paramount to the Quaker tradition. Nor can we edit traces of God, because that would be untruthful. They won't be truthful representations of what these people were saying. We would have to use something, and we would have to find a way to codify a word that we could all use, because some of the quotes, especially from early Quakers, need a word there. Similarly, this is another thing that Jenkins promotes about Quakerism, is that Quakers don't hold to fixed liturgical forms, and there's no creed that they follow. So if we remove traditional Christian language from Quakerism, we run the risk of two things. The first thing is by creating a creed by absence. If we say we don't use the word God here, that is a creed to an extent because we're limiting people's experience. And the second point, which follows on from that, is what happens to all the many Quakers who resonate and minister using traditional Christian language? Are they to be silenced? Are their ministries considered less worthy, or will they just be changed later on? And furthermore, it'd be mortifying to think that there would be people in a meeting who have been given a leading but don't want to say it because it contains language, traditional Christian language, which might not be encouraged in the group. I don't believe that we should stop using a term just because people find it difficult. And I know maybe I'm speaking from a position where maybe I haven't experienced the things that other people have experienced, and I do thoroughly understand that. But what I think we should be doing is what we are actually encouraged to do in meeting anyway when people is ministering. If someone is giving ministry in maybe language that I certainly wouldn't use, well, firstly, of course it isn't in language that I would use, because that leading hasn't been given to me. The leading's been given to that person for the precise reason that that person is able to deliver that leading in the best way. And so if it is in language that I'm not familiar with, or that I don't agree with, or makes me feel uncomfortable, what I might be doing is thinking about, okay, what's the meaning behind this? What's the truth that's being said here? What in this ministry is resonating with me? And that way, you're giving room for all to give ministry using the language that is most comfortable with them, whilst also challenging yourself to see what truth there are in statements and not just doing away with them because something sounds discomforting. And this makes me think of Quakers when they first came to America, for example. There's again, probably maybe it's apocryphal, but about a meeting held between Quakers and Native Americans where they had translators there, but they didn't translate the ministry and the meeting for worship. And afterwards, they asked one of the Native Americans, was that okay? And the Native American said something along the lines of, it didn't need to be translated because it resonated with, well, maybe what Quakers would say, that of God in me. So overall, whilst I appreciate that Simon Jenkins was giving Quakers a bit of time in the limelight, I think lots more could be had. I think that Jenkins has misunderstood a lot about what Quakerism is, and also the complexities that there exist with getting rid and abandoning a phrase. Perhaps a better title for this article would be, if I could go in and edited it, would be something like, some Quakers are right who don't need God, but other Quakers are also right who do need God. Never come to Quakers and ask for an absolute. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you liked it, please do click on the thumbs up button, and do check out some of my other videos about Quakerism in the UK. If you want to keep up to date with the latest videos, please do remember to subscribe as well. It really helps. Thank you.